Good morning, crime community. I'm here to read out another chapter of Poisoner in Chief. This is the conclusion to this chapter. It's called I Feel Victimized. The conclusion from all the activities, he said, was that it was very difficult to predictably manipulate human behavior in this way. Gottlieb had been warned that Kennedy would ask about his destruction of MKUltra files. When the question came, he produced a prepared statement and read it. He said that before leaving the CIA in 1973, he decided to clean out and destroy files and papers which he felt were superfluous and not useful, relevant, or meaningful to my successors. He decided to do this, he said, had absolutely nothing to do with about covering up illegal activities. It was for three other reasons. Bullet point one, he wanted to contribute to a continuing and important CIA program of file destruction to handle a burgeoning paper problem. Bullet point number two, the file were of no constructive use to the agency and were capable of being misunderstood by anyone not thoroughly familiar with their background. Bullet point number three, the prominent scientists, researchers, and physicians who had collaborated with us should be protected. I felt that the careers and reputations of those people would be severely damaged or ruined. For instance, in today's climate of investigations, if their names and CIA connections were made public. The hearing went off well for Gottlieb. No one asked him what kind of experiments he had directed or whether he had been maintained interrogation centers outside the United States, or if any of his subjects had died. He portrayed himself as a victim, not a perpetrator. I feel victimized, thus the name of the chapter, and appalled by the CIA's policy veteran, someone or some group selectively pinpoints my name by failing to delete it from documents released under the Freedom of Information Act. He said, my name is selectively left on released documents where all or most others are deleted. Kennedy asked Gottlieb about documents suggesting that the superiors knew about and approved everything he did. There was a policy review of this project at least once a year, and more frequently than that, later he replied. He added that he could specifically remember briefing the director of the CIA repeatedly on these matters and named Alan Dulles, John McCone, and Richard Helms. Gottlieb did not have to mention that while MKUltra was in its peak, Dulles and his brother, Secretary of State John Foster Dulles, were regularly briefing President Eisenhower at the White House. Years later, an academic study concluded that given the number of informal conversations that Eisenhower had with the Dulles brothers, he almost certainly knew about some of the details of MKUltra. His willingness to choose the CIA for semi-lawless deeds suggested that he at least set the tone. The senators, however, were content with Gottlieb's testimony that he had briefed his CIA superiors about MKUltra and did not ask about Eisenhower. Gottlieb gave the senators little help. Whenever one of them approached a delicate matter, his memory failed. He answered questions with clandestine evasion. I cannot remember. I do not have that in my head. My remembrance is not clear. I have no specific knowledge of that. I am a little hazy. Even Gottlieb's fuller answer was strikingly devoid of substance. When he was asked about experiments with poisonous mushrooms, for example, he replied with meaningless verbiage. To answer the question precisely, said, I did hear about the mushroom discussion, and to my best remembrance of that, and I want to underline this to answer it most accurately, would have to relate it to a particular project from which it was done. But my personal remembrance of it, that was a project that was discussing some of the very basic aspects of relating a chemical and a structure to an activity. As the next day, Washington Star reported, Gottlieb showed remarkable skills in answering questions with words so vague that the scientists found themselves with very little substance when Gottlieb was finished. He did, however, offer a bit of historical context that he hoped might help his inquisitors to understand what he had done. There was tangible evidence that both the Soviets and the Red Chinese might be using techniques of altering human behavior, which were not understood by the United States and which would have implications of national survival. He asked about the use of unwitting subjects in drug experiments. He replied, there was no advanced knowledge or projection of or protection of the individuals concerned. Harsh as it may seem in retrospect, it was felt that in issue where national survival might be concerned, such a procedure and such a risk was a reasonable one to take. Testimony was not all Gottlieb left behind on that day. News photographers managed to take his picture. Lenzinger had arranged for this not to happen, but the photographers outmaneuvered him. When they entered the chamber where Gottlieb had testified, he did not protest. Photos of him appeared on many front pages the next day, including that of the New York Times. Others showed him balding but fit, with short hair, pronounced features, with intense eyes, wearing a dark suit and a tie with bold zigzag patterns. Although Gottlieb failed to protect the secret of his appearance, he protected all of his others. From his perspective, the 1977 hearings, like the one at which he appeared under a pseudonym 2 years before, was successful. No investigator or senator came close to the heart of his mystery. Many of them considered MKUltra to have been a crazy little project that paled in significance beside such transgressions as assassination plots and domestic spying. This allowed Gottlieb and the CIA to keep secrets that might have been the most explosive of all. They steered us away, a church committee lawyer, Burton Wise, and concluded years later, makes a lot of sense that Frank Olson was one reason. My educated guess is that he was having qualms. They were afraid he might talk, and for that reason, he was pushed out the window. One prominent member of the church community, Senator Gary Hart, came to a different conclusion. My guess is that the program did not receive a more extended and detailed attention because of three factors, he surmised. First, time and staff resources. Two, a sense on the project of moderate conservative elements of the committee that it was a sideshow that got off the rails. And three, the necessity of maintaining bipartisanship throughout the 2 years and beyond by not sensationalizing the most extreme or even bizarre behavior, then thus in the midst of the Republican side undermining the credibility of the agency during the Cold War. For more conservative members, this was an embarrassing sideshow. Boys will be boys. That was the price of confronting the communists. They probably would have been a long-range price to pay for a full-scale, sensational focus on MKUltra. 3 other former MKUltra officers testified before Kennedy's subcommittee after Gottlieb was finished. All were equally forgetful and obscure. Robert Lashbrook admitted that he had been Gottlieb's deputy, but insisted that the details of actually what was being done that I was not aware of. The psychologist John Gittinger was, according to George Hunter White's diary, regularly visited Operation Midnight Climax, the safe house in San Francisco, claimed to have had not the slightest idea of what went on inside. In her syndicated column the next day, the sharp-tongued Mary McGrory called them a very rich variety of twits retired from the company. The man who was their chief did much to explain their special cast of mindlessness. McCrory wrote, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who was heard but not seen. His health was not equal to the ordeal of television coverage. Sat in the back room of his testimony, was piped into the hearing room. He was most clearly the most muddled of them all. He had insisted on immunity for his covert appearance, but why is a mystery. He remembered next to nothing. That's the end of that chapter. The next chapter is called If Gottlieb is Found Guilty, It Would Be a Real First. Apparently, they haven't arrested too many CIA agents in this country, ever. So if you think I'm speaking any truth here, please like and subscribe and have a nice day.